My name's Joseph Riley. I'm 59 years old, and for most of my life, I drove yellow school buses for the Cleveland Public School District. 15 years of juice boxes, field trip permission slips, and fourth graders screaming about Pokemon cards. But eventually, the early mornings, the cold winters, and the constant chatter wore me down. So I retired. Or tried to. Truth is, I wasn't great at sitting still. So after 6 months of pacing around my apartment, I took a job driving one of the city night buses. No kids, no chaos, just people coming home from shifts or drifting in from bars. I actually liked the solitude. The 981 route I worked started at a terminal in Midtown, looped through old factory roads on the east side, and came back every 90 minutes. Overnight, the city went quiet. Streets were dead. Most nights, I barely saw 5 people. This particular night, it was cold. January in Cleveland isn't kind. I was on my 3rd loop of the shift, somewhere between 2:30 and 3 o'clock a.m., when I pulled into a stop near a shuttered laundromat to take a break. It was the kind of stop where no one ever waited. Dimly lit, chain link fences, broken benches. I leaned my head back and shut my eyes, not to sleep, just to rest. That's when I heard the hiss of the doors. I hadn't opened them. My eyes snapped open, and standing just outside the bus was a man. Thin frame, dark coat, gray hair, probably in his late 50s like me. He didn't knock, didn't wave, just stared at me through the glass. I opened the doors automatically, maybe out of reflex. He stepped in without a word, swiped a bus pass across the scanner, beeped once, then walked all the way to the back row. I called out, "You can let me know where you need to get off. I'm the only bus for the next hour." But he didn't respond, didn't even flinch. Maybe he had earbuds in. Maybe he was just tired. I shrugged and put the bus in gear. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced at the rearview mirror. He was still staring straight ahead, not out the window, not at his phone, just locked onto the front windshield. Blank expression, empty eyes. The whole ride, I kept checking that mirror. He never moved, never blinked, like he wasn't waiting to get somewhere, just sitting. We hit every stop on the loop and he didn't budge. Eventually we reached the second to last station on the route, a little depot near a fire station. I paused, looked back, and then he stood. He walked up the aisle slowly, dragging his feet, eyes fixed on the floor. And when he got close, maybe 2 feet away, I saw his face clearly. His mouth was clenched tight, his brow twisted. His entire face was contorted in fury, but not the kind you yell with, the kind that builds in silence, the kind that waits. He stared down at me. "Sir, is everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer, just kept staring. Then, without warning, he turned around, walked back to the same seat, and sat down again. I sat frozen for a full minute. I've been in near collisions, seen drunks throw up down the stairs. But this was wrong. Like something bad was about to happen, and my instincts knew it before I did. I pulled away from the stop and headed to the final terminal. This was it. After this stop, the route looped back to where I'd picked him up. We arrived. I put the bus in park. The roads were dead. Not a single car passed. Not a soul walked by. Then he stood again. Faster this time. He stormed down the aisle, reached the front, and shoved me. Hard. My shoulder hit the driver's side window. Before I could react, he pulled a handgun from his coat and pressed it against my temple. I looked up into his face, and it was twisted with the same rage. But now it was vibrating, like his whole body was barely holding something in, like he wanted to tear something apart and was just waiting for permission. I didn't say a word, didn't breathe. He didn't either. Then he opened his mouth and screamed. Right in my face. A horrible, guttural, unhinged scream. It wasn't words. It wasn't a threat. It was just rage in sound form. And then he let go. He stepped backward, turned, and calmly walked off the bus. I shut the doors, locked them, drove away from that depot like a man possessed. When I got back to the terminal, I called the police immediately. They told me to come in and file a report. They tracked the bus pass ID he used and found a match in the system. 2 days later, a detective showed me a printed photo. "Is this the guy?" he asked. But it wasn't. The man in the photo was 38, clean cut, lived across town, said his wallet had been stolen last week. So whoever stepped onto my bus that night was not the man he claimed to be. And to this day, I can't figure it out. He didn't try to rob me, didn't say a single word, didn't demand anything. He just stared, screamed, and walked away. And what still haunts me isn't the gun, it's his face. Because that man wasn't just angry. He looked like he'd been carrying that rage for years, and I was the one he chose to show it to. My name's Natalie Perez, and for nearly 4 years I worked the late shift at the old Providence Central Library in Rhode Island. It was one of those massive granite buildings that looked more like a cathedral than a place with late fees. High archways, black iron gates, marble floors that echoed with every step. People loved it during the day. Tourists took photos, students whispered behind textbooks. But when the sun went down, that building changed. It's hard to explain unless you've been inside after dark. The lights hum, the silence thickens, and the deeper you walk into those long, cold aisles, the more you start to feel like you're not alone. I was 29 when I took the full-time night shift there. They called the position collections reorganizer. But all that meant was that I roamed the floors overnight reshelving returns, shifting entire sections around, and fixing whatever the day staff had left in chaos. I didn't mind the solitude. I liked working without interruption. But even in my first month, I noticed something felt off about the job. It wasn't the work, it was the space. The building was old, built in the 1880s, and massive. 3 floors, dozens of rooms, long corridors with winding staircases that led nowhere. Security cameras only covered the main entrances, and once the doors locked at 9, it was just me. At first, I chalked the unease up to being alone in a place that wasn't meant to be quiet. But over time, that feeling grew. Some nights I'd be working in the history wing, and I'd hear the soft creak of a shelf 2 aisles away, or the rustle of papers when no carts were nearby, or worse, the faint click of shoes on marble when I wasn't moving. And every time I'd pull my headphones out to check, silence. One night in late November, it got worse. I was working the second floor nonfiction wing around 2 a.m. It was raining lightly outside, just enough to tap on the stained glass windows. I had just reshelved the last of the returns and was pushing my cart back toward the elevator when I heard it. Thump. I stopped, listened. Another thump. Then the unmistakable slap of something hitting the floor. I peeked around the corner and looked down the row of shelves. Nothing. Could have been a book falling. That happens. But this felt intentional. I took a breath and walked toward the sound. Each aisle I passed was darker than the last, since motion sensors only activated lights as you entered. Eventually, I reached the far end, history section, 900. There were no books on the floor, no boxes tipped over, nothing. But when I turned to walk back, I saw him, at the very end of the wing, near the archive door, a man. He was barely visible, standing against the gray wall, but I saw the shape of him. Tall, narrow, wearing dark clothes. At first, I thought maybe security had come in for a surprise check. I called out, "Sir, are you supposed to be here?" But he didn't move, just stood there, watching. I took a step forward and he slid slightly to his right, almost like he was hiding behind one of the pillars. That's when every instinct in me screamed. This wasn't security, and he didn't want me to see his face. I turned and walked, fast, but didn't run. Didn't want to let him know I was panicking. I passed the empty aisles, got to the front doors, still locked, and pushed my way out using the emergency exit. Once I was outside, I sprinted around the back, fumbling my keys as I got into my car. I locked the doors and called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the entire building, every floor, every hallway. No one was there. They said there were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, nothing stolen. They asked if I was sure I hadn't imagined it. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded and let them finish their report. The next day, I told my manager everything. She was sympathetic, let me switch to day shifts for a while. But when she asked me if I'd recognized the man or seen his face, I couldn't answer, because no matter how hard I try, I can't remember his face. It's like it's been wiped from my memory. All I can recall is that feeling, like he'd been waiting for me to notice him, like he'd already been watching me for a while. Some of my coworkers thought I faked it to get out of the night shift, but I know what I saw. I know I wasn't alone, and what terrifies me most is not that someone broke into the library. It's that I don't think he broke in at all. I think he was already there, and that night, he just decided to let me see him. My name's Tyler Grant, and last winter, I took a night shift stocking job at a place called Northwood Supply Depot just outside Eugene, Oregon. It's one of those giant, low-cost home improvement warehouses. Big parking lot, massive steel shelves, and during the day, it's full of dads arguing with their wives about lumber sizes. But at night, it's empty, silent. Just one overhead radio quietly playing oldies across 50,000 square feet of nothing. I worked the graveyard shift solo every Thursday, midnight to 8 a.m. My usual coworker, Freddie, had requested medical leave for back surgery, so it was just me for the week. Honestly, I didn't mind. I could move slow, wear my earbuds, and nobody would be on my back about deadlines. That night, it was raining hard. Like horizontal sheets of it. You could hear it pinging off the metal roof like static. I remember dragging a loaded pallet jack toward aisle 22, plumbing fixtures and water heaters, humming along to the tune of Midnight Train to Georgia on the intercom. I wasn't in a rush. I figured I'd make 3 laps through the store, restock what I could, break down the boxes, and clock out. I had just started shelving sink attachments when I heard it. A faint thud, not dramatic, not like in the movies, just soft and low, like something tapping glass. I paused my music and stood still for a few seconds. There it was again. 2 knocks. Tap, tap. I figured it was the wind. This place was always creaking. Still, something about it unsettled me. So I walked over to the front entrance. The glass doors were still locked. No motion outside, just the glare of yellow parking lights through the storm. I turned back and kept working. 15 minutes passed. I wheeled a fresh cart to the drywall section, turned down the aisle, and then I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, near the garden center exit, something moved. I stepped closer. It wasn't just the wind. There was a man, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing a soaked hoodie, standing under the awning, watching me through the glass doors. At first, I thought maybe it was a late delivery driver or a lost customer, but the way he stood there, not waving, not knocking, just staring. I yelled, "We're closed, man," and held up my hands. No reaction. Then he backed away into the shadows without a word. Weird, but maybe he was just sheltering from the storm. A half hour passed. I went back to work, this time in the lighting aisle. That's when I heard it again, bang. This time it wasn't soft. It was sharp, violent. I dropped the extension cord box in my hands and ran back toward the front. And there he was again, closer this time, pressed up against the glass. His face was pale, twisted with some kind of rage, and in his hands, a cinder block. He slammed it once against the door, then again, and again. The alarm didn't go off until the 4th hit. Glass shards exploded across the floor like ice. I stumbled backwards, slipped slightly, then sprinted toward the back office near the employee lounge. I locked the door behind me, heart pounding out of my chest. Called 911. "Yeah, someone's trying to break into my store," I whispered. "He just smashed the glass. I'm locked in the back room." The dispatcher stayed calm, asked my location, told me officers were minutes away. I stayed crouched under the desk, eyes on the grainy security camera feed. The guy had climbed inside. He just stood there near the broken door, dripping water on the linoleum. But he didn't go for the registers, didn't grab any tools, didn't even walk past the front entrance. He just stood there, like he was waiting, watching. I thought maybe he was high. Meth heads aren't rare in the rural Northwest. But there was something too still about him, too calculated. Like he wasn't confused or desperate. He was exactly where he wanted to be. A few minutes later, red and blue lights hit the storefront. He turned his head and casually walked back outside through the broken frame. By the time the cops got in, he was gone. They searched the perimeter, questioned me, reviewed the footage. No theft, no vandalism except the door. No signs of weapons, one of them said. They left that night thinking he was just another drifter looking for shelter. But here's what haunted me. He had plenty of shelter outside. And if he wanted tools or cash, he could have taken anything. But he didn't. He broke the glass, walked in, and stared at me. Nothing else. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering what would have happened if I hadn't locked that office door. Not because I think I'd be dead, but because whatever he wanted, I'm still afraid I might have given it to him.